They've made an enormous amount of money, and I believe the supermarkets are fleecing us, because when you go in to buy a packet of Ryvita or something and it's gone up from 90p to £1.50, who is making the profit off that? But the thing is, it's when you put...
It's almost like it's not a cost of living crisis, it's potentially a cost of greed crisis. You've missed out the key word, though. It's a cost of capitalism crisis.
From Anne Dalgatti. There you are.
With the lack of EU nationals, will the country's hospitality and fruit-picking sector be able to survive another year?
Right, so this week we had down in London, we had the Home Secretary saying there was no good reason why the UK couldn't train up enough fruit pickers, amongst other things, and we don't need to bring more, increase immigration or bring more people in. Then the very next day we had the Prime Minister saying, oh, actually, let's have another 10,000 extra visas for exactly those people. So who's in charge, Malcolm?
Prime Minister's in charge, and the...
Doesn't he need to have a word with his Home Secretary?
Well, the industry, both the fruit pickers and the agri-industry and, in fact, the fisheries have been in extensive discussions with UK government on this. And we are in a period of transition where we have to move to a new world outside of Europe. And we've relied very heavily on European, particularly Eastern European workforces in the past. But a practical solution has now been found. The industry is now generally happy with.
So what do you make of the comments by the Home Secretary then?
Well, I think what...
I mean, she is adamant that that is not what should happen.
Yes. I think
she's just wrong, is she?
Well, I think what she's referring to is the issue that we have. There are job opportunities in this country, and we have people who are economically inactive, and yet we're bringing a lot of people in to do jobs that perhaps we ourselves don't want to do anymore. And she's trying to wrestle.
Yeah, the economically inactive people are not fit to work. These are people who have long-term health issues because of the Conservatives wrecking the fucking NHS. And do you think that they're going to have the physical fortitude to pick fruit? I think you live on a different fucking plane of reality, mate. I don't think you've really thought this one through. Because again, there's this kind of erroneous idea that because our labour force participation rate is so low, it's because there's a bunch of people who just refuse to work because they're too lazy, which is absolutely categorically not the case. The vast majority of economically inactive people do indeed have long-term illnesses, which means that they cannot work.
So that issue of how do we help to get our own people back to work versus bringing in outsiders to do these jobs.
She's doing a bit more than wrestling, isn't she, Malcolm? In fairness, she's saying we shouldn't have any more. Well, and Rishi Sunak has just is now allowed 10,000.
No, the government policy, which has been agreed. I mean, she was speaking in a convention outside of the government. She was speaking in a conservatism convention thing.
Yeah, but the
government policy has been settled with the seasonal worker route to come in to help us transition to this. But we also have to realise that we've got massive labour shortages in our own economy.
Yeah, so you're not bothered that the two top people of government saying things are polar opposites on the same policy.
But don't you agree?
Hang on, just let him answer that question, Lena. You're not bothered by that?
I don't think they're polar opposites. I think the policy's been set.
What do you think?
The policy's been set. The policy's been set, and she's asking a question for all of us to ask
No, she was making a... Come on, Malcolm.
You're not
going to answer. She was making a...
Yeah, exactly. Like, who's going to drive all the way down from, you know, I don't know, Herefordshire, all the way over to Suffolk, where the fruit actually needs picking, for example? Like, who's going to do that?
Statement that we should be not bringing in more fruit pickers, but we should be training up our own. Nina.
Don't you agree that the job opportunity that Suella Braverman was banging on about was Rishi Sunak's job, which is what she was making a blatant play for?
Okay.
Well, and the thing is...
And on the question itself?
Yes, on the question itself. The thing is, you know, decades ago, we used to have tatty holidays and fruit-picking holidays. You know, we just have been a nation that hasn't done it for a while. I don't know whether it's just lack of opportunity or we just...
Well, let me give you a figure, Nina. So in 2020, only 5% of seasonal workers in farms in Scotland, for example, were from the UK.
Yes, but the thing is, you know, she talked about training up fruit pickers, butchers, lorry drivers. They're very, very different. I mean, the logistics of fruit picking, you have to go to a farm. You can't just bus people out from, you know, and the EU workers stay in.
And literally, we have evidence for this, is that literally you cannot pay people enough to do these jobs. I think the wages that I saw being bandied around that were being offered in these fruit picking jobs was utterly insane amounts of money, like upwards of £20 an hour to pick fruit, and people still refuse to do it, partially because of location and partially because, yeah, who wants to fuck up your spine picking fruit? No one wants to do that shit. I'd much rather earn £10.50 an hour sitting in an office chair in a call centre than I would working in the back-breaking heat, continually bending over backwards picking up fruit. Nah, mate, I'll take the pay cut, thanks, and I will save my spine.
You know, caravans. How many kids are going to be... You know, it's hard work. Maybe young people expect more from a job than that. I don't see that. I just don't see... It's impossible somehow.
OK. Guy at the back in the corner, yeah.
I've worked in hospitality for the last 2 years, and we're desperately short-staffed, I can promise you. So I asked the man in blue on the panel, are EU nationals welcome in the UK to help bolster our economy or not?
Do you want to answer that?
When we came out of the EU, we did the first trade deal we did was with the EU.
Surely they
we
have
have a trade deal with the EU.
You might as well just answer his question directly.
Yes.
And our immigration today is running at higher levels than when we were in the EU.
Yes, with non-EU
So therefore,
nationals.
and we now have a points-based system. Hang on, we have a point-based system now. So anybody who comes to this country and qualifies in a points-based system can come and work in the country. So the answer is yes.
The answer is yes, OK. You've stuck your hand up. Does that not satisfy you?
That doesn't satisfy me. We don't need just high-skilled workers. We need all types of workers, OK? So I ask you again, is it not our NHS? Do they not deserve to have workers? Because they are desperately short-staffed as well. Why aren't unskilled workers also welcome in the UK?
Well,
And the thing is that high-skilled immigration workers, or high-skilled immigrant workers rather, like high-skilled immigrant workers actually are worse for the indigenous population of the UK. We actually have a worse system now, in that now all of the people who have been working for a long time in their chosen career who are indigenous British people or existing citizens of the UK, for example, they are now competing for promotions for the managerial jobs with the immigrants who are the high-skilled quote-unquote people being brought in as part of the labour force. Whereas previously, existing citizens were being promoted into those jobs to deal with the influx of people coming in on the bottom rung of the ladder on the entry-level jobs in these particular industries. And so you got what was basically a good world for everybody, where, you know, British people got to be promoted and get better jobs, and the jobs at the bottom of the totem pole were being filled by people who came in and be happy to get higher wages than we're getting in the countries that they had immigrated from. We have literally got the worst of both worlds with the points-based system for immigration. It's so monumentally stupid because people can't grasp the idea that more people means a bigger economy, that means more consumers, which means more demand for goods, which grows the need for jobs. Because they can't think of anything else like a closed system. Their brain power doesn't really function enough to be able to understand the idea that immigrants coming in grows the economy overall, so there are more jobs for everybody to be able to fulfill the additional need for commodities that the larger population would require. It's so stupid. It's so dumb. And now they're just like, well, now, great, brilliant. I will work in the same menial job I've always worked, except now a manager's going to be, immigrating from Bulgaria or from Turkmenistan or from Cabo Verde or whatever.
Point system is graded. It's not the point system is graded for different categories at different skills.
Oh, all you've missed, Kath, is just chat about the demise of the SNP, the theoretical demise of the SNP, which isn't happening.
So it does accommodate this.
Jackie.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that there is a level of migration that will support both our economic needs but also our public services. And the NHS is currently carrying 5,700 nursing vacancies, and that's affecting patient safety. So we absolutely need to do something. But my understanding is...
Keir Starmer doesn't want EU nationals coming in and taking nursing jobs. He's explicitly said he wants to train existing people whilst also not paying them enough for them to want to go through all of the degree-level qualifications that they would need to go into the medical sector. It's so stupid. It's such ridiculously awful policy from everybody about everything.
There has actually been something like a 95% increase in work visas, but these people aren't coming to Scotland. And we need to look at why that is. Now, certainly in the Labour government previously, we had a Fresh Talent initiative. It was about encouraging people to stay in Scotland, to make their life in Scotland, and to work here. We need to look at approaches like that to ensure that we have people in the country to suit our economic needs, but also to help with our public services.
And would you increase the number of visas that are given out for people to come and work in farms or in hospitality?
I think clearly the number has increased substantially. I do think we need to take it further, but it is about directing people to the right parts of the country. They are simply not coming to Scotland, and we need to understand why that is.
OK, let's hear a bit more from our audience before I go around the panel. Yes, woman there in the striker T-shirt.
I think one of the reasons that they're not coming to this part of Scotland is because the infrastructure and the logistics, like you said, is just impossible. I live in Ardnamurchan, which is just over the water, and our ferry over the Corran Narrows has been broken for several weeks now. We took a 92-mile detour to be here tonight.
92
miles, and that is the only way we have to get across the water. So it's all
first
very
of all,
well.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure to be here.
Thank you. How long is the ferry not been working?
The ferry was off since before Easter. We only had a temporary ferry at the time. It was a smaller vessel, and it's not. We don't know when it's going to come back. But these are the problems that the Highlands especially are facing. It is not just our ferry, which impacts us massively. There's been problems with all sorts of different ferries and infrastructure. It really needs looking at, because we depend on hospitality, we depend on workers, we depend on all of this, and we've just not got any support. We're not hearing anything from our MSPs, our MPs, or anything. Nothing is being done, and it needs sorting.
Okay. What's the name of the glasses?
Yes. Dr. Ash is how much unemployment people have we got, so why do we need incomers? We've got high unemployment if we not.
Well, what we have is in the UK, we have 1 million...
No, we have record low unemployment. Unemployment's like at the point at which we're dropped below the Naira, apparently, which is causing the theoretical increase in inflation, apparently, right? As far as the incredibly well-paid economists of the Bank of England are concerned. Yeah, as far as they are concerned, we have dropped below the point at which unemployment increases inflation because of workers' bargaining power. Like, I disagree, so that's the thing. I don't think that we're at that point. But it's clear that unemployment is indeed very low. It's the lowest it's been since fucking Callaghan.
Scotland.
I'll come to Scotland. It's because it's 10%, it's exactly the same numbers. It's about 1 million job vacancies and 1 million unemployed looking for work. And in Scotland's about 120,000, 100,000, so it's the same number. But we have 20% of our working population economically inactive. A third of whom are on long-term sick, and many of whom are carers. They also include students. They'll be early retirers, and we know by talking to that cohort that a lot of them would like to get back to work. They feel they've lost their way. They haven't got a pathway back to work, and I believe we should have a responsibility to try and help them to get back to work, because that's 20% of our working population.
How many people leave school and just sign on?
How many people leave school and
just sign on? How many people do?
Well,
not many.
Does anyone know that figure? I have to say I don't.
Alison,
I don't believe it's that many people, to be honest.
So, well, let's deal with the substance of the question. Thank you for your point. With the lack of EU nationals, will the country's hospitality and fruit-picking sectors be able to survive another year? And we know that the National Farmer Union, for example, has been complaining about not having enough workers and fruit and vegetables rotting in the field. Alex?
Well, I agree with Nina that the Home Secretary's speech, whether it be to an American think tank, whether it be on the moon, Malcolm, it was a job application to be a future Tory Prime Minister. That's what she was about, because the Tory party are fixated on immigration. They want to fight the election on immigration. But the reality is, not just for the agricultural sector, not just for fruit pickers. I was very struck, incidentally. She said that we should train people up to be berry pickers. Now, one of my first jobs was picking berries. I don't remember much training involved. I mean, it was quite simple. You just picked them off the raspberry bushes. But the larger point is this, that the exit from the single market and from free movement has made every family in this hall tonight £2,000 a year worse off. £2,000 a year. And when times are tough like they are just now, that's a huge amount of money for most families, the vast majority of families. And that's because the economy is smaller as a result of coming out of the single marketplace. And the economy is smaller as a result of labour shortages in key areas of the economy. And it's all very well to say, well, Keir Starmer is going to come in and sort it out. But Keir Starmer won't commit himself to going back into the single market. He won't commit himself to freedom of movement because he's frightened of the Tory attack on immigration. And so when Jackie said earlier, people are desperate to get rid of a Tory government. Yes, I think they are. But why on earth would they then vote for Sir Keir Starmer to implement almost the same policies across...
Oh my God, I can't believe I'm agreeing with Alex Salmond. What world am I in? He's been on the money the vast majority of this panel so far. I feel dirty. I'll fucking wash that shit off. Ugh. But he's right, red Tory, blue Tory.
It's not nonsense, Jackie. On Europe, where Labour should, you would think, be arguing to get as much back into the economic free market, the single market of 500 million people as possible, Labour won't commit to that because they're frightened of the Tory attack on immigration. And as a result, the two major parties at Westminster are going to be offering effectively no choice in the coming election. It's either going to be the Brexit with the Tories or Brexit with the Labour Party. And it is, Jackie, why Scotland needs to make its own choices with regard to its economy and its trade.
Mary.
True. True and based. Do not disagree in the slightest. 100% correct.
Yeah, just on the initial point, I worked quite closely in my previous job as Environment Minister with fishers, farmers, hospitality sector, and they were at their wits' end, not just about Brexit and what it ended up meaning for them all, but also their complete inability to communicate with the UK government and to have them listen about the needs that they had for seasonal workers and to respond to that. I'm afraid that Brexit has been probably the single greatest act of economic self-harm. The OBR, the UK government's own economic advisors, have said that the economic impact of it is twice that of the pandemic. And that's before we even get into what we've lost culturally. So my solution, the SNP's solution, is that we get ourselves back into the EU. We do so as an independent nation, and then we can live, work, love and move across 27 nations of the EU like we used to be able to.
But that's quite some time on. Forgive me for interrupting, but that's quite some time. What are the fruit pickers, the farmers, the hospitality, what are they going to do in the meantime?
Well, that's what I'm doing virtually, or I was doing virtually every day in my previous role, was lobbying the UK government to do the right thing by seasonal work visas and to reflect the real number of folks that we need to be getting into work in your businesses. It's been inexplicable, actually, the way that they've responded to it.
Jackie, do you want to just answer Alex Salmond?
I mean, people in chat and or in the future comments section, let me know how much devolution allows them to be able to give these visas out themselves, right? I'm not sure how much powers that they do have, but it's interesting. I wonder if they could theoretically use devolution as a method of being able to bring these people in, because if they can, which I don't know whether they do or not, I'm not a massive expert on Scottish politics or devolution per se, because if they could, why haven't they already given out visas for people to come in and live in Scotland to be able to fulfill these roles on, seasonal work visas, right? I assume not. I'm assuming that something as important as visas is centralised in Westminster rather than devolved. But, please correct me in the comments because I'm not sure.
Point about basically if you're voting for Labour, you might as well vote for the Conservatives, because frankly you get the same when it comes to immigration and Brexit.
But that's an extraordinary proposition, and I have to say it's one I reject, because if you contrast what the Tories are about, right, and go back to 4.5 million of COVID money to their cronies...
No, but
specifically... Wait a minute.
As opposed to all of the donations you've got from, Lord Sainsbury, chairman of Tesco, all these different people that you were trying to... that Alistair Campbell was writing notes to, saying, oh, we'll ignore the conference and do your policies if you give us loads of money, now that our coffers are basically empty because of the stupid fucking court cases that we've lost and all the members that we've purged, right? As if that's any different to the Conservative Party. Get a bloody fucking grip, you Labour right turds.
If you want to get into all the different... We will be here all night, but specifically on this question, which is about a lack of EU nationals and immigration, what's the difference between you and the Conservatives?
There is a clear difference. The Tories have a toxic relationship with the EU. Labour want to repair that relationship. We need to do it for business, for people, to ensure that we are able to have decent trade relations with them. That's currently not the...
Yeah, so we're not going to have... What we're going to do is not going to join the single market of the customs union, but we're going to talk about them nicely, right? And that's going to give us carry us loads of favour, so that the tariff-free trade and the free movement of people doesn't come back, but it feels nicer, right? Just the Conservative line on this particular issue, just sugar-coated with some Labour niceness, right, and efficiency. Don't forget the efficiency and dynamism as well on top of that.
Case, because the Tories aren't interested.
Will you take us back into the EU, Jackie?
I have to say, I campaigned for the European Union. I campaigned against Brexit. I voted against it. And actually, in areas that I represent, the SNP were missing from that debate. I went out and delivered SNP leaflets.
Will you take us back into the EU, Jackie?
Let me finish. It's
2023.
Listen, you have spent, okay, less than you did on the Shetland by-election on your EU campaign.
So
I will take no lectures from people who currently are not using the powers they have. So let's talk about something that the EU did, Erasmus. That impacted on a lot of young people. It gave them opportunities to travel. Wales have replicated Erasmus. The SNP have still not done that. We do not have a replacement for Erasmus. So I will not take lectures from people who, frankly, deliver the rhetoric to you about wanting to go back into the EU.
Oh no, SNP haven't done Erasmus. Oh no, that's definitely not an improvement on, the existing state of affairs. But it's clear that the SNP's both rhetoric and policy is way fucking better than Keir Starmer's "I'm not going to renegotiate Brexit" stance. Clearly, the SNP are the people who are actually speaking positively about future EU relationships, unlike the Labour Party at this point.
EU, but have no idea how they would do it, no plans to do it. There is a pragmatism about what we face just now. And what Labour would deliver.
Oh, stop saying you're pragmatic. I'm so sick of hearing, oh, Labour pragmatic, not ideological. Fuck off. I wish I could have a more cogent and, you know, well-reasoned and erudite response to the kind of things that Labour are saying. But it's just all done through focus groups, the same lines repeated over and over again, using the same buzzwords. And I quite frankly, I'm absolutely have my piss boiled to the point but I can no longer comment on this with some kind of rational, thoughtful response. I just want to tell them to fuck off. I want them to campaign at my door so I can tell them to fuck off multiple times to their faces. I'm at my wit's end. I'm at my wit's end, chat. I'm sorry that you came to the No Justice stream expecting some kind of incisive analysis of the politics, but I just know my brain's broken and all I can do is just insult people because that's all these Labour fucking idiots deserve. Quite frankly, they don't deserve, you know, scrutiny of their political platform because it's so clearly been done insincerely, opportunistically, rather than for the genuine, actual utility of the policies they're putting down. I'm done with bothering trying to analyze these in some kind of with any kind of gravitas because it clearly does not deserve it. What's our opinions on Angela Rayner? I feel sorry for her that she's essentially tanked her own career for nothing.
What would deliver is a much closer, better working relationship with the European Union.
And more
because
EU
that's what
nationals
we
working
need.
in Scotland?
Well, I would welcome EU nationals working in Scotland. Equally, I would welcome people from Scotland being able to work in the EU as well.
Can I just say, I did Erasmus, and it was one of the most horizon-expanding experiences of my whole life, you know, coming from...
So why haven't you done it? Why haven't you
can I tell you this? What Jackie just
2026?
described there about a closer relationship with the EU, this is the perpetual disappointment...
But what about the Erasmus point? It's obviously great for you, and she's saying the SNP have not replicated it.
It's the perpetual disappointment that we've come to know from Scottish Labour, and I just set out that our approach, the SNP's approach, and we're the only ones now defending Scotland's European future.
On Erasmus
it's an independent country. Back in the EU,
you brought it up.
Back in the Erasmus scheme.
Right. So, and the reason why Scotland hasn't replicated it.
Look, I'm sorry. We can try and put plasters over the disasters that the Tories and Labour have delivered for us. Instead, we will focus on the big picture, which is getting Scotland back into the EU.
Okay.
No, just a quick word on trade, on Brexit. Just a very quick word on trade on Brexit.
Within less than a minute.
One of Scotland's most profitable sectors is food and drink. We are 25% of, sorry, actually a third now of UK exports. So if you think that we represent the population, we're at a third of UK exports. Last year they were 8 billion. That was up 20% from the previous year, and now 10% since we up on when we were in Europe.
Okay.
That's an industry. It doesn't seem to be food and drink seems to be trading very well, up 20%, record-breaking with or without Brexit. I don't see Brexit as in any way endangering our trade.
There are other areas of trade which have not done so well, as you know. Let's take one more question from, because we've only got about 10 minutes left, believe it or not, from Morag McKee. Oh, there you are.
Hi. So in the House of Commons this week, the SNP's Mary Black was quoted saying that this is not a cost of living crisis, this is a cost of greed crisis. What are your thoughts on this quote?
Mary Black of the SNP, of course, was in the House of Commons on Tuesday, and she talked of profiteering during the pandemic. These are, I'm paraphrasing what she said, high supermarket prices and the large profits enjoyed by the energy companies. And she said that, therefore, this is not a cost of living crisis, it's a cost of greed crisis. Can I just ask, Morag, how's it affecting you?
Massively. Especially with food shopping, just daily bills. Funnily enough, today I was speaking to my colleagues at work, and one of them is a single mother, and she lives at home with her son, and she says that her electricity bill has went up by over £150 a month. Things like fuel. I mean, even if you just look in Fort William now, the cost of fuel here compared to other places, it's ridiculous.
And we're thinking of that 92-mile round journey as well.
Yeah. So it's really noticing it, and it's not just certain individuals, it's everybody is noticing it.
Okay. So, Jackie, let's kick off with you. I mean, obviously, you can and you will lament this being the party's position, the state that you think the country is now in as a result of the Conservative government or as a result of the SNP. What would Labour do?
So we've been very clear about setting out a cost of living package to help people. For example, I know energy prices have gone sky high. We would have a windfall tax on the excess profits of the oil and gas companies who are making, huge profits at the moment, and that would put £1,400 into everybody's pocket because the cost of energy has just outstripped anything we know. I know in my local area, food prices have gone up enormously to the extent that, and I won't name the brand of butter, but it was security coded by the supermarket. I mean, that is just extraordinary. People are not able to afford the basics, so we need to do much, much more.
The thing is, Labour have been incredibly clear about what the problems are right? They've been very clear that people can't afford food. They've been very clear that people really want to see action on the NHS and action on the cost of living crisis. They've been explicitly clear to say the Tories have failed the country, right? They've been very clear at saying that our public services are in disarray because of the policies of the Conservative Party. What they've not been clear upon is any policies that they have at all to fix any of this stuff. They've just said, we will not be the Conservatives and do better. We will do an regulation, and we're going to give councils power to tackle the cost of living crisis. But as for actual policies, nothing, nada. You know, it's very unclear, fuzzy, one might say, blurry indeed, as the opposite of clear.
We have set out plans, including, for example, at the moment, we know interest rates have gone up to 4.5%. Those on mortgages who perhaps are on fixed-term mortgages coming off them, they will struggle enormously. And there are mortgage rescue packages that we've suggested that, frankly, the SNP government have yet to implement. These are practical things we're suggesting that would help people, including looking at how we do rent reform to ensure that those who are private renters are also protected. So
the SNP have done rent caps. What have you done?
There's a range of things we would do, but the top priority for people is tackling this cost of living crisis. It is crippling people, and we are simply not doing enough, either at UK level or in Scotland.
People shouldn't have to choose between food and their heat, so it's critical. Instead of saying SNP should do this or Labour should do that, do something now, because everyone is needing something now.
I particularly like I think it's a brilliant phrase. It's a brilliant phrase, cost of greed, because what we've seen in the last few years is real naked greed at the top of government.
True, they're going to pay for cheap packets of Lurpak. They're going to subsidise Lurpak, right? So to take the electronic tags off, using the money that they've raised from abolishing the non-dom tax status.
From Boris Johnson to down to every little Tesco, Tesco supermarkets, they're all making money, and it's when people put
Tesco's profits, just for the record, their profits have fallen. Actually,
they've fallen, but they've made an enormous amount of money, and I believe the supermarkets are fleecing us, because when you go in to buy a packet of Ryvita or something, and it's gone up from 90p to £1.50, who is making the profit off that? But the thing is, it's when you put
it's almost like it's not a cost of living crisis, it's potentially a cost of greed crisis. You've missed out the key word, though. It's a cost of capitalism crisis. Because of course it is. Because why do you think I have my channel? It's interesting, as I said, when you look at food inflation, one of the countries with really low food inflation in Western Europe is Norway, whose food inflation is 12 points lower than ours is, when 40% of their grocery retail delivery is consumer cooperatives. A business model where the profits are indeed shared between the consumers and passed on as price savings for those who are members of the cooperative, right? That is why Norway is having much lower food inflation on the retail end than we are, because there's no profit. There's a huge section of their grocery retail that isn't making profits in the way that the capitalist firms are, right? A consumer cooperative is a socialist idea, right? That may be operating under capitalists, but it's a socialist structure, a communitarian structure, unlike the profit-driven nature of the consumer capitalism that besets countries like the UK. Obviously, we have issues with trade deficit that is leading to increased percentage of food inflation too, because of Brexit, because of the fact that we're an island. But the fact that that Norway definitely imports a lot of food, yet because there's no profit-seeking incentive, right? They can pass on only profits from grocery retail sector to the members of the consumer co-op. That is pressing down on inflation, rather than here, where Tesco and Sainsbury's are laughing all the way to the bank with the money that you're spending, for example.
Profits before people, which is what this government has done for so long and continues to do, every aspect of it. That is completely wrong, and that's why we're all suffering. Everybody is. Everybody is. The train companies, the water companies, as you said, all the sort of the energy bills. It's nonsense. The profits they're making for their shareholders are obscene. They're obscene. This is money that should go into providing the service that they're supposed to provide for us.
All right. So,
what's the name, chat? What perchance is the name of an economic system where the main goal of a company is indeed driving profits for shareholders, right? What's the name of that system, indeed, where the primacy of shareholder dividends is put above the utility of delivering things for the basic needs of humanity? Can anybody think what that might be? It's a real fucking head scratcher, isn't it?
greed at the top of government, I mean, it's saying, but also in terms of supermarket prices, I mean, you know, Tesco, Asda and Sainsbury's, I think they're the top three. Their profits have fallen, but nonetheless, prices are sky high for people. A, is government being greedy itself, and can anything be done about supermarket prices?
Well, I think the government's just put a package together of 94, call it 100 billion. You think that the COVID furlough and COVID extend cost 400 billion. So
it is indeed fucking neoliberalism.
A quarter of that has been put into the whole cost of living support package for 2 years. Right now, the government's taxpayers are effectively paying half of all your energy bills. All of our energy bills have been paid, of which half of that is coming from the windfall tax from the oil and gas companies.
Can I just say one thing? Grant Shapps made a statement last week, one of the stupid statements, saying that the Tories are filled with steely determination. They're like rats in a sack. Never mind steely determination. What he said, he told us this. He told us that in a few weeks, energy bills are coming down. It's summer coming, for heaven's sake. I mean,
okay. So I think what we say is this is not exclusive to the UK. This is not a UK. This is a global issue.
Sorry,
okay? Now our food inflation is running about 19.5%.
And that's interesting to say, oh, it's a global problem. Yeah, how about we compare ourselves to other countries who are doing better than we are? What might they be doing that's better than us, right? The only countries in Europe that have worse food inflation than us are all the fucking Baltic states and places like Romania and Bulgaria, who rely heavily on Russia for their food imports. I wonder why that might be massively impacting their food inflation. Yet you compare us to Denmark, to Norway, to France, whatever it might be, countries that rely on other means to get their food sources. Spain, for example, we import lots of our own food from Spain, for example, and all of their food inflations are lower than ours. I wonder why. I wonder why that might be. Can anybody think of a couple of reasons?
In the UK. Germany is a point higher and France is 2 points lower.
France, overall inflation, hang on, overall our inflation is higher than any of the other G7 countries, as you know.
No, our economy is now growing now. We've just had an upgrade from the Bank of England, the IMF. Our economy is now growing and we're not in recession. Okay, so, but in terms of food inflation, the input costs, mostly, obviously, fertiliser and fuel, have gone massively through the roof with the whole outcome of the Ukraine war. That is now under control. We've got that under control through government intervention. Prices are now coming down.
Yeah, our government intervention is massive because we had to hugely deficit spend to get our way higher than everybody else's bills down to still higher than the remainder of Europe's bills, but reasonably manageable if you're not incredibly poor, right? That's where we've put ourselves to through huge amounts of deficit spending and a windfall tax that didn't even really work because they could invest their way out of even paying any of the windfall tax in the first place. Yeah, the members of the European Union have had a deal on gas and oil price controls, which we don't have access to because we left the European Union.
Inflation will come down, but right now it's very difficult, which is why the government's put a lot of money into, especially the most vulnerable families, 8 million families getting particular targeted benefit.
They wouldn't have needed to do that if we didn't have a fucking incredibly stupid energy policy, right? Your stupid energy policy, the Conservatives and New Labour's stupid energy policy, which is entirely to blame for all of this, as well as obviously Brexit too. Oh my God, I cannot with these people. And they're literally saying we've done a really good job by having to spend even more money subsidising this shit than any other government in Europe, right? We have massively increased our overall debt to GDP ratio because of the failures of our energy policy up to this point by continual Blatcherite governments. The absolute audacity, the barefaced cheek of these people to come to us and say that they're doing something when all they've done is trying to paper over the cracks in their ridiculously nonsense, stupid energy sector policy for the last 45 years makes me, it infuriates me. It makes me so angry. I'm sure you can tell, future chatters and future viewers.
On cost of living benefit, add in the increases to the minimum wage.
When was the last time you were in a supermarket?
There's a package of measures that have been brought in to mitigate this very difficult time, and we now need to guide the economy through and get back to growth and low inflation, and that's what we're determined to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there have been eye-watering profits made by oil and gas companies, but also by others, including Amazon, etc. And the SNP have advocated for windfall tax on them because people are suffering, as you say, having to choose between putting food on the table or heating their homes through one of the coldest winters that we've had in recent times. Now, there are, our Lord Offord can narrate a number of factors here, but let's not forget there are very specific UK issues here that have come into play, not least the disastrous Truss Kwarteng budget, as a result of which I have friends who now can't pay their mortgage That's how disastrous their approach was. But in Scotland, listen, we have been trying to do what we can with limited powers. The new First Minister, Hamza Yousaf, one of the first things that he did was take the Fuel Insecurity Fund and treble it from its original 10 million up to 30 million. We have been actually, dealing with cost of living in Scotland for years, however. We have 1,140 hours of funded childcare. We have the baby box. We have the largest provision of free school meals, primary 1 to 5. We're about to deliver 6 and 7 in the coming years. And allow me to mention that the Scottish child payment, it was £10, we made it 20, it's now 25, into the pocket of eligible children every week. Busting poverty. People in the rest of the UK should be crying out for that.
Alex Salmond.
True. Fucking based SNP absolutely fucking slapping Labour in the face with their genuinely progressive reforms that the Labour Party are completely ignoring. It's frustrating to hear the SNP not properly talk about the overall macroeconomic structure of the country, right? Because that is obviously playing a huge part in that, as is obviously Brexit, as they mentioned a lot of times before. But all of the progressive policy initiatives, they're all coming from the SNP.
Now, Malcolm said a minute ago that the UK economy was growing, yet in the last quarter it grew by 0.1%, which is the lowest measure of growth you can possibly get. So technically he's correct, but if he thinks that's a satisfactory performance, then he's living in cloud cuckoo land. Now, is it about greed? Well, I saw one statistic this week which indicates it might be. It was that the food prices in supermarkets have gone up by 13%. But for own brands, where people who are struggling have to go because they're cheaper, they've gone up 25%. I don't see how that's explicable, and I think there should be an examination into that. And last, the point I make is about energy prices.
I mean, Unite the Union have done a bunch of studies on this stuff, showing actually specifically that there's plenty of evidence showing that it's a cost of greed crisis, because they've analysed how the kind of corporate profits and how that has impacted the way in which we're looking at food prices. I'll put the link to the future study down in the description so people can view it later on. But Unite the Union have done plenty of studies to show that there is indeed profiteering going into these price rises, rather than just the necessary increases they have to cover their overhead increases.
Ofgem prices your energy, your electricity, on the international price of gas. Now, the international price of gas has been going down, but the electricity prices haven't been going down. But in Scotland in particular, we generate 100% and more of our electricity from renewable sources. Now, I've been looking very closely. The price of wind hasn't gone up in the last year. The price of water hasn't gone up in the last year. So why has Ofgem let the price of electricity soar? So I would sack the Ofgem board and take some immediate action and help working families in this time of crisis.
OK.
No. The key is, what he's missed here is the fact that Scotland could become independent, which, that should be the thing that he's headbanging about, surely, and, I would agree with him on that one, so that they could be able to take their own grid into their control, given that the energy generated in Scotland is the highest section of it, as far as I'm aware, is renewable. I think that's what he's alluding to, so that, less of their energy mix was gas, so their bills in Scotland could come down. They could also come down if they nationalised their gas fields in the North Sea as well, so they could then sell it at cost to their own citizens. They could do that with independence, and they could tell England, paying their huge extortionate private sector and wholesale market price gas bills, and tell them to go and fuck themselves, quite frankly.
It always comes around too soon, but I'm afraid we are out of time. Every week I think we could go on for so much longer, but our hour is up. Thank you very much to the panel for coming along to beautiful Fort William this evening.
I think it's really sad that we didn't get more people in the audience being able to get their say on that one. I think they would have made some interesting things. I mean, if I was in the audience, I would have loved to have mentioned privatisation. I would have mentioned, obviously, nationalisation of the actual resources themselves. I would have discussed the energy mix being so dependent on gas because of privatisation. That's a really great video by Tom Nicholas that you should all check out about that one. That's definitely what I would have mentioned in that case. And I'm sad that the audience weren't allowed to comment on there because they ran out of time. But it's definitely an interesting discussion there. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.